Hi everyone, it's Katrina. Number 10. The forest in the Sahara. It's believed the Sahara Desert was once much more than a vast wasteland of sand and rock. Researchers from the University of Arizona have determined that about 11,000 years ago, the Sahara Desert received 10 times more rain than it does today. Between 11,000 and 5,000 years ago, it was a green paradise where early hunter-gatherers thrived. There were all kinds of animals. There was plenty of fresh water to drink, and there may have even been advanced civilizations. The lead author of this study, Jessica Tierney, says annual precipitation wasn't exactly what you get in some of the wettest rainforests of the world today, but was enough to maintain a stable ecosystem. Then, about 8,000 years ago, it started to dry up. The rain stopped, humans began migrating out of the area, and whatever ruins they left behind were covered by the shifting sands. Some experts have speculated there could be evidence of lost human settlements buried. Some even believe there could be sphinxes, maybe pyramids, and all manner of structures built by extremely early humans. These early humans likely had the same technological level as the Egyptians thousands of years later. If true, it would change everything we know about early human civilization. Number 9. Radiation pulses and the mass extinction. The greatest mass extinction event in our planet's history occurred about 250 million years ago. It's called the Permian extinction, or Permian-Triassic extinction, and it's one of the 5 major extinction events in our past. For a long time, scientists have struggled to make total sense of what happened. First, they realized that suddenly 80% of all life on Earth vanished. Then they tried to piece together how that happened. The most popular theory is that a large volcanic event in Siberia pushed huge amounts of carbon into the stratosphere, collapsing the ozone layer and leading to an unimaginable warming event across the globe. It was global warming on an unprecedented scale, basically happening overnight. It's pretty scary because such a thing could still happen now if one of our mega volcanoes decided to erupt. But something else may have played a role in the deaths of almost all life on Earth. Scientists are saying that a lethal pulse of UV radiation from the sun could have helped make everything go extinct. UVB radiation may have bombarded the planet because of the sudden thinning of the ozone layer, preventing plants from using photosynthesis properly. Instead of all the animals getting too hot to live, scientists are now saying they could have run out of food. The UV radiation caused the plants to slowly stop producing, leading to a worldwide famine. Number 8. Bearskin clothing. A new study published by researchers from the University of Tübingen shows humans have been wearing clothes for a very long time. Archaeologists uncovered traces of bones from a cave bear at an archaeological site in Germany, with the bones showing cut marks. But these weren't ordinary cut marks. They were made on the metatarsal and phalanx, 2 areas that have almost no usable meat. The cut marks are not the result of a butcher preparing a meal, but rather of someone carefully stripping the skin. The bones are about 300,000 years old, meaning they may or may not have been made by Homo sapiens who had only just evolved. It could have been a different early human ancestor who used wooden hunting weapons like spears and throwing sticks. This discovery has major implications for the development of human beings as a species. It appears to be the earliest evidence of a cave bear being used for food and clothing. Professor Nicholas Conard says the bearskin was likely a key adaptation for northern humans trying to survive in a cold environment. Fashionable or not, people have been wearing bearskin for the better part of 500,000 years. It shows a shocking level of ingenuity, especially if Homo sapiens were involved. We only came into existence about 315,000 years ago, and already we were busy creating the world's first fashions. If the Neanderthals were responsible, it's even more impressive, and says a lot about how smart they were. Number 7. The earliest jawbone in Europe. The earliest evidence of a modern human being in Europe was recently revealed thanks to a jawbone found in Spain. The jawbone is 65,000 years old, originally discovered over a century ago in 1887. Scientists always thought the bone belonged to a Neanderthal, which made sense. Neanderthals were believed to inhabit Spain long before Homo sapiens arrived. One of the theories is that human beings invaded Europe and stole it from the Neanderthals. Recently, scientists took a new look at the mysterious mandible. Using modern technology, they revealed it to have human origins. It now appears to be the oldest evidence of a human living in Europe, suggesting humans arrived long before previously imagined. The implications of this are huge and dramatic. It looks like Homo sapiens may not have necessarily stolen Europe from the Neanderthals, but lived alongside them. This only adds to the mystery of what became of the Neanderthals. Scientists have never been able to definitively say why they went extinct. Some guess early humans wiped them out through warfare. Some have suggested they couldn't adapt to a changing climate and died. And yet science has shown that Neanderthals had similar intelligence to us. Seeing that we lived alongside them in Europe suggests a totally different story. It could be that Neanderthals bred with Homo sapiens until their own bloodline vanished. And now for number 6. But first, it's shoutout time! Big thank you to A and K Winter for supporting this channel. We couldn't do it without the support from viewers like you. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos about amazing discoveries. Number 6. Californian seafarers. Archaeologists recently uncovered evidence of human activity on a deserted island off the coast of Ventura County in California. The discovery was made on Santa Cruz Island, the biggest island of the Channel Islands. Researchers found 3 different sites with ancient tools, along with harvested shellfish. What they believe is that 12,000 years ago, migrants from Alaska paddled their boats to Santa Cruz Island and built what could have been the first city in California. This would have happened at the end of the last ice age. The earliest inhabitants of the American West arrived from somewhere, but archaeologists aren't exactly sure from where. All we know is that they must have had boats if they reached such a remote place. Dr. John Erlandson from the University of Oregon says they used these boats to hunt marine mammals to catch fish and to gather seaweed and other food. As for where they came from, they likely migrated from Asia to Alaska, then paddled their boats south to where the weather was more suitable. The remains of this island civilization are long gone. Archaeologists have found sites where they believed they lived, but nothing remains except the prehistoric remnants of seafood dinners and tools. Still, there is no denying that the discovery of these ancient seafarers changes what we know about the migration to the Americas. These were the first true seafarers, exploring islands and moving vast distances 11,000 years before the Vikings. Number 5. Vikings in Portugal. According to the official European history books, the Azores were discovered by Portuguese explorers in the year 1427. However, a new discovery of mouse DNA is changing the narrative. It seems the archipelago may have really been discovered 700 years prior by opportunistic Vikings. Professor of Ecology and Evolutionary Biology Jeremy Searle made the claim in 2015. He said the first humans to visit the Azores came from Scandinavia. This was based on the DNA of ordinary house mice. Mice currently living on the Azores are genetically distinct, connected directly to mice from Scandinavia, and where there are men, there are mice. The only thing that makes sense for how the Scandinavian mice wound up on the Azores is that the Norsemen brought them over on their ships between 700 and 850 AD. But there was more evidence than just mouse DNA. Researchers also looked at sedimentary layers of lakes in the Azores. They found evidence of human habitation around that same time frame, along with compounds from livestock feces and charcoal from wood burning. It's clear someone was living on the island 700 years before it was discovered by the Portuguese. Based on the mouse DNA, it was most likely the Vikings, but how they got there, what they did on the islands, and why they left is still a major mystery. It could be that they didn't like all the heat and sunshine, preferring their cold home in Norway. What do you think happened to them? Let me know in the comments below. Number 4. Rats and the plague. One of the most important events in European history was the outbreak of the Black Death. It ravaged Europe between 1347 and 1353, killing millions. Random outbreaks of the plague would continue until the 19th century. We don't have an exact death toll, but historians have said it could have been anywhere between 1/3 and 1/2 of the European population. How did such a devastating sickness spread? Scientists have always believed it was rats. Filthy rats spreading the plague through overpopulated European cities. The bacterium which causes the plague, called Yersinia pestis, is known for being transmitted from rodents and their fleas. The plague started in rodents and spilled over into humans. However, there is some scientific controversy. A recent study suggests environmental conditions in Europe would have prevented rats from spreading the plague. The study says that rats may not have played that large of a role in transmitting the disease. The conditions were not ideal for maintaining a reservoir of disease-ridden rats. The weather just wasn't what you would expect in a plague situation. But across the world, in China and the western United States, the conditions were perfect for a reservoir of wild rodents with plague bacterium. Here's where things get even crazier. Ancient DNA and lost texts from Central Asia show that they also suffered from a similar string of outbreaks. Scientists are now suggesting that the disease was imported from China to Europe. It may have come through trading routes, being spread from merchants and explorers instead of sewer rats. If that's true, it means the Black Death was the result of globalization in the medieval world, and not just rats. The prehistoric monoliths of France. Scientists in France found a series of rare monolithic stones in the central part of the country. It came as a pretty big surprise because no stone circles have been found in this part of France. Standing stones have been uncovered in just about every part of the world, from Stonehenge in England to Africa. But this one is really baffling archaeologists. They excavated about 30 monoliths, making up a huge circle, but almost all of them had been intentionally buried. Scientists say it's as if the community wanted to bury or hide the history of the stones. This could have been done by early Christians who wanted to erase all traces of paganism, or by the people who built the stones in the first place following a religious catastrophe. It's unclear how old these stones are, but they do appear to be from the Neolithic era 6,000 years ago. The stone circle represents a previously unknown group of humans living in central France with advanced building techniques. This could change what we know about Neolithic tribes in Central Europe. If only we can figure out what the stone circle was used for and why it was purposely destroyed. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Number 2. Monkeys and their tools. Pedra Furada in Brazil contains over 800 archaeological sites dating back 12,000 years. There have been hundreds of fascinating ancient rock paintings found at these sites. Researchers have also found charcoal from ancient fires and stone shards that they say were used as tools. The most shocking thing about the tools is that they have been dated to be 50,000 years old. If you're familiar with the arrival of human beings in the Western Hemisphere, you'll know this doesn't make sense. The Clovis people of North America were supposedly the first to arrive. That was only around 16,000 years ago, according to mainstream archaeology. If that's the case, who in the world was making tools in Brazil 34,000 years earlier? Scientists think it may have been monkeys, specifically the capuchin monkeys, which currently reside in the tropical forests of Central and South America. The capuchin monkeys are generally regarded as the most intelligent of all the monkeys on this side of the world. Researchers have even observed them using stones to break open nuts, a primitive use of a tool. But could it truly be possible that monkeys were crafting stone tools 50,000 years ago? Some say yes, it is a possibility. Things could be even crazier than anyone ever imagined. Archaeologists from the National Institute of Anthropology and Latin American Thought say these sites in Pedra Furada may belong to monkeys. But why the brilliant monkeys stopped building fires and making stone tools is beyond anyone's wildest guess. Do you think capuchin monkeys were smart enough to do all this? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Number 1. Money in the Levant. Scientists have made a shocking discovery in Israel and the Gaza Strip. Dozens of pieces of silver from around 1700 BC may have been used as some of the earliest currency in the world. If true, these silver pieces represent the oldest form of money in the Levant, which encompasses modern Israel, Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon. Archaeologists from the University of Haifa say previous studies showed people in the area using physical money starting around the 12th century BC in the Iron Age. But these silver pieces are 500 years younger than that, meaning the dates need to be changed. Chemical analysis showed the proto-coins were made in Anatolia, Turkey. They were then passed along through unknown parties until they finally reached Israel and became cash. Researchers have always known ancient cities in the Levant traded with one another in the Bronze Age. But the discovery of silver pieces of money, a very early version of coins, changes everything. These weren't just primitive people bartering with one another. They had their own system of currency that they made up themselves. The currency would have been traded between traveling merchants and business folk in towns the exact same way we trade paper bills today. It wouldn't be for another 1,600 years or so that minted coins made an appearance. Number 10. The Cannibal Sorcerer. One of the most awful and terrifying figures from European history is a German bandit named Peter Niers. He was a prolific serial killer and supposedly a master of dark sorceries. From what we know based on the old tales, the cold-blooded killer conducted cannibalistic rituals on his victims. Peter was born to a peasant family in Germany around 1540. This was right at the end of the German Peasants' War, an uprising that started in 1525 to challenge the unfair feudal system causing economic disparity. It was a time of great chaos and violence, an environment where a cannibal sorcerer could really thrive. Peter performed his dark rituals, ate his victims, and killed people indiscriminately throughout the dense forests of Germany until he was finally captured in 1577. However, he somehow managed to escape. Once he fled from the authorities, the rumors about him really started getting wild. Peter was supposedly feasting relentlessly on his victims so that he could gain supernatural powers. In 1581, he was captured for the second time. During his torture and interrogation, Peter admitted to murdering 544 people. In the end, Peter was crushed on the breaking wheel, a fitting end for a horrific human being. But all these years later, we still don't know if he was just a sick monster, or if Peter really was a sorcerer who dabbled in the dark arts. And now for number 9. But first, it's shoutout time! I want to say a big thank you to Jen Geisenhoff, and obviously you're not a golfer, for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos about amazing history. Number 9. Biblical Cannabis. There is one thing your Bible isn't telling you, and it has to do with cannabis. A recent discovery has proved that marijuana was used at a religious site in Israel during the days of the Bible. As much as Christians may hate to admit it, ancient worshippers of God were smoking holy weed as they prayed. The discovery takes us back to 1963, when a pair of limestone altars were found at a Judahite shrine in Beersheba Valley at Tel Arad. The shrine was devoted to Yahweh, the original name the Hebrews used for God in the Bible. And recently, when scientists used new technology to analyze material found on the altars, both of which are currently stored at the Israeli Museum in Jerusalem, they found evidence of frankincense. But more importantly, they also found evidence of cannabis. Scientists say this is the first time physical evidence of cannabis has been found in ancient Israel. It's come as a pretty big shock to biblical scholars, to say the least. We already knew cultures around the world used hallucinogenic substances to induce a kind of religious ecstasy. This was done all over the globe and helped make religious ceremonies seem way more intense. But lead author of the study and the curator for the Israel Museum, Urum Man, said nobody had ever thought the Kingdom of Judah took part in such rituals. Up until now, the Judeans' hands were clean. However, with this new discovery, there is no denying that in the days of the New Testament, worshippers were getting a little something on the side. Number 8. Stone Age tunnel diggers. There's a vast network of underground tunnels spread underneath Europe. These tunnels are extremely mysterious and have been found everywhere from Scotland to Turkey. Researchers say the remains of the tunnels could be all that's left of an ancient subterranean superhighway, a Stone Age subway system used by Neolithic humans 12,000 years ago. The enormous tunnels are baffling because there is no way people in the Stone Age should have been able to undertake such a massive building project. Yet somehow, using nothing but primitive stone tools, Neolithic people managed to carve one of the most complex underground labyrinths in the world. However, not a lot is understood about the Stone Age tunnel diggers. For example, archaeologists have never been able to connect all the various tunnels found in Europe. It's largely speculation that the tunnels were ever connected, not a proven fact. One of the vocal archaeologists arguing for the existence of the underground superhighway is Dr. Heinrich Kusch. Heinrich says there's been hundreds of tunnels found underneath the ruins of Neolithic settlements across the continent. Seeing as so many have survived for so long, the originals must have been huge. Most of the tunnels have likely collapsed by now. Heinrich says in Germany alone there are over 2,200 feet of underground tunnels, and more have been found in Austria too. But at the end of the day, nobody can come up with a solid theory for what the tunnels were used for. Some of the tunnels are so big, it almost feels like they may not have been built by humans at all. Could they have had help from an advanced civilization? Where do you think these tunnels came from? Do you think they really exist? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Number 7. Ancient mad scientists. There may have been mad scientists at work during the Bronze Age. An ancient discovery has just revealed shocking biological evidence of a complex breeding program. Around 5,000 years ago, a very unusual group of creatures, sort of like donkeys, were buried alongside royals at a cemetery in the ancient city of Aleppo in Syria. The animals were called kungas, an extremely rare type of creature that was prized by elites in Mesopotamian society. We know they existed because we have physical evidence of them and descriptions of them in ancient texts. But up until now, their biological truth has remained a mystery. It was only recently that scientists were able to use advanced technology to complete genetic studies of the bones found in Aleppo. Now it looks like the beasts may have been man-made hybrids, a kind of science experiment that created entirely new animals. This is shockingly complex work for humans in the Bronze Age. Human beings took a group of donkeys in 3000 BC and genetically modified them into kungas. They did this by breeding a female domestic donkey with a male Syrian wild donkey. This all happened about 2,000 years before humans bioengineered the mule by breeding a donkey and a horse. This might seem simple enough, but bioengineering new types of animals isn't an easy thing to do. It really makes you wonder where these Bronze Age people came up with such an advanced idea. What could have prompted them to mess around with animal genetics? Do you think it was something for the gods, or maybe just for fun? Let me know what you think in the comments. Number 6. The Urfa Man. The Urfa Man is an ancient statue that was discovered during archaeological excavations in Upper Mesopotamia, or modern-day Turkey. The statue is significant because it dates back to about 9,000 BC, making it 11,000 years old. It's considered the oldest natural-looking life-size sculpture of a human. That makes it one of the most important works of art on the planet. The Urfa Man was carved by a mysterious civilization who undertook several other intense building projects at a time when the rest of humanity was sheltered in caves. Because the statue was found during construction work, the exact location of the find is unknown. Experts think it was uncovered about 5 miles from the site of Göbekli Tepe, near the site of Urfa Yeni Yol. Göbekli Tepe is the most baffling place on the planet, and it's considered the oldest megalithic compound ever built. Some have said Göbekli Tepe is the ruin of the Garden of Eden. Some even think it was a grand city that somehow survived the biblical flood. But no matter what people say, experts still have never been able to figure out who built the place or how. Its stones were carved with expert precision over 5,000 years before Stonehenge was built. The Urum Man was likely created by the same people who built Göbekli Tepe. It stands about 6 feet tall, has deep black eyes, and it's wearing a heavy necklace. The Urum Man may have been sculpted in the likeness of a king or a tribal leader. However, it could also depict a local shaman or maybe even a visiting alien. Let me know what you think in the comments. Number 5. The woman who found America. Gudrid was the woman who found America. Christopher Columbus has long held the title of the man who found the New World. But the truth is that a woman from the Middle Ages did a lot more exploring than Columbus, and she's been ignored by historians. Gudrid the Far-Traveled was born around the year 985 AD in Iceland. We know about her life because it was recorded in the Saga of the Greenlanders and the Saga of Eric the Red. These sagas describe the exploration and failed settlements of North America. From these narratives, we know Gudrid began her travels at around the age of 15, when she sailed to Greenland with her father and a colony of settlers. Many of the immigrants died, but Gudrid survived. She settled in Greenland and eventually married a man named Thorstein Eriksson, the brother of Leif Erikson, before starting to explore. Gudrid traveled from Greenland to the shores of North America, ultimately landing in Newfoundland. This was a place the Vikings called Vinland. She and her husband attempted to settle Vinland with a party of 60 men and a small collection of livestock. Gudrid even gave birth to the first European in the New World around the year 1005. She named her son Snorri Thorfinnsson. Sadly, the settlement only lasted about 3 years. The conditions were too harsh even for the Vikings, and they abandoned North America and went back to Norway, where they were celebrated as heroes. Number 4. The Ether. Up until recently, most scientists agreed that a mysterious material known as ether was one of the most important primordial elements in the cosmos. Scientists from the 19th century claimed ether was the substance which allows gravity to work. It was also said to be the substance that allows light to travel through space. Much earlier, in ancient Greece, philosophers and deep thinkers believed ether was the pure essence exhaled by the gods. In Plato's story of Atlantis, he even mentions that the ancient city is enshrouded in an air he calls ether, the exhalation of the gods themselves. Ether even found its way into electromagnetic theory in the 19th century. Aristotle, who lived 2,300 years ago, believed ether was the 5th main element after earth, water, air, and fire. These days, scientists don't talk about ether anymore. Instead, they're always going on about dark matter. The truth is that dark matter could in fact be the ancient energy the Greeks, Indians, and Chinese called ether. While it's not known for certain, ether could be entirely real, making up the majority of matter in the universe. Number 3. Nikola Tesla's missing files. Nikola Tesla was found dead in January of 1943, and immediately afterward, the FBI raided his hotel room in New York City and stole all his stuff. The inventor had all his documents seized by the US government, who would likely hope to use his inventions to develop some kind of weapon for World War II. Tesla had allegedly been working on a particle beam death ray, and so the United States didn't want the information to fall into the wrong hands. They took all the property and documents from his room, and that was the last we heard of it. What happened to Tesla's files is still a mystery today. The FBI only declassified 250 pages of the Tesla documents in 2016, and this was only because the pressure of the Freedom of Information Act forced them to do something. Later in 2018, they released a few more documents, but most of the Tesla files are still missing. Many people believe the documents are missing because the US government is still using the inventor's ideas to power new technology. But there is something even stranger at work here. There's been rumors circulating for years that Nikola Tesla came from the planet Venus in 1856. He was left in the care of his human parents, but in fact came from another planet. This was the reason he was so brilliant, and why the government was so greedy to take all of his work when he died. It could be that Nikola Tesla's alien intelligence paved the way for the technological boom of the 20th century after the war. Number 2. Atlantis and the City of Z. The lost city of Z is supposedly a lost city that can be found somewhere in the Amazon jungle of South America. Atlantis is another mysterious place that's never been discovered, but it's said to be located somewhere underwater in Europe. But what if these two unusual places are one and the same? According to the myths, the lost city of Z was constructed in ancient times, upwards of 10,000 years ago. Some have suggested the fabled jungle city could have been built by the descendants of Atlantis. The Atlanteans who survived the horrible devastation of their homeland 11,000 years ago may have fled to South America. Then they built a new, shining metropolis in the forest. There is no scientific evidence that the two legendary cities are related, but it isn't completely beyond the realm of possibility. We know there is likely a lost city in the jungle because of the first-hand account given by Portuguese explorer João da Silva. He came across the ruins of a mystifying jungle city in 1753. He described the place in amazing detail, but never gave up its exact location. Legendary explorer Percy Fawcett even went missing in 1912 searching for the lost city. Its streets were supposedly paved with silver, it had gold shimmering on its roofs, and much of it was built underground. It could be that the descendants of Atlantis used their last remaining wealth to create the city, only to succumb to the jungle. What do you think about this theory? Let me know in the comments. Number 1. The Baltic Sea Anomaly. There is a potential alien vessel sitting at the bottom of the Baltic Sea. In June of 2011, a Swedish diving team went searching for a shipwreck in the waters off the coast of Sweden. As they were searching for the wreckage, their instruments picked up something unexpected. Sonar revealed a massive object, something that looked like a crashed alien ship on the sea floor. Its shape, contours, and size make it seem like a submerged UFO. However, scientists say that's a bunch of nonsense, and geological experts say it is nothing but a natural formation. The team behind the original discovery is called Ocean X, and they returned from their shipwreck hunt with a clear image of a circular object that seemed to be about 200 feet in diameter. They then revisited the site the following year to get even more detailed sonar scans of the object. Tales of little green men were rampant after the initial discovery, and the team wanted to learn more about the anomaly. This time, they collected stone samples at the site. The stone was handed over to scientists at Stockholm University, who ran all kinds of tests. When the results came back, though, everyone was a little disappointed. The samples taken from the Baltic Sea Anomaly contained granite, sandstone, and volcanic rock, meaning it was a perfectly normal sample. However, the rock samples haven't stopped people from coming up with their own theories. One of the most popular conspiracy theories claims the Baltic Sea Anomaly is a spaceship that is over 140,000 years old. Number 10. Hercules in the Sewer. Archaeologists in Italy unexpectedly received a fantastic gift. Construction workers found a mysterious statue of Hercules hiding in an old Roman sewer. They were repairing the sewer underneath the streets of Rome when they came across a marble sculpture of a man dressed an awful lot like Hercules. He was identified by his lion skin headdress, a trophy Hercules received after defeating the Nemean lion from Greek mythology. The marble sculpture is life-sized, but nobody can say for sure what it was doing underground in the sewer. Jane Draycott from the University of Glasgow said she doubts anyone was expecting to find anything like it under such circumstances. But it gets even better. The statue of Hercules was discovered along the famous Appian Way. That was Rome's greatest highway, a historical road that's currently buried underneath the modern Scott Park. Construction workers were trying to address the sewer lines because they were collapsing, creating sinkholes in the park. But then they found Hercules, and all construction work was halted. He appears to have been intentionally buried in the sewage tunnel about 100 years ago. Somebody dragged the marble sculpture 65 feet underneath street level and then buried it there for unknown reasons. The whole thing is a huge mystery. We don't know how old the sculpture is either, or where it originally stood. But considering its proximity to the Appian Way, it may have been a statue on the road leading into Rome. This could have been one of the beautiful sculptures seen by visitors as they entered the famous city. Number 9. Rare Viking Grave. A rare and exciting discovery was recently made in Oslo, the modern capital of Norway. Archaeologists found a Viking grave at the edge of the city near Lake Holmendamen. During the Viking Age, between 793 and 1066 AD, this part of Oslo was a settlement, but the community was erased by the new city of Oslo as the Viking Age ended and the medieval era began. The city grew quickly, and the ancient settlements of the Vikings were covered under miles of road. Most of the site's history is now buried under modern homes and businesses. For that reason, the discovery of an entire grave is exceptional. Archaeologist Marianne Buge-Kramer says up until now, only 58 burials have been found in the city, most of which date back to the 1800s. The last great discovery came in the 1930s, when a Viking sword was found 3 feet underneath Oslo's City Hall. And you might be wondering, what exactly have archaeologists found buried under the city? So far, they've uncovered a brooch, a pair of knives, the blunt part of a shield, and equipment for horse riding. They also discovered the remains of a man who died around the year 850 AD. Out of all the burials that have now been found in Oslo, 55 of them belong to males and only 4 contained females. Archaeologists are a little baffled as to why they've uncovered so many more male graves than female graves. But they say it could have something to do with the fact that men were buried with large iron axes and swords. Apparently, those iron weapons are easier to find than the delicate bronze jewelry in most Viking women's graves. What would you prefer, to be buried with jewelry or with weapons? Let me know in the comments. Number 8. Subterranean Piping. The Sheikh Bahai Hammam in Iran is an ancient bathhouse steeped in legends and mysteries. According to the fables, the hot waters of the bath were warmed by a single candle that never went out. The bath itself was named after Sheikh Bahai, a scientist who lived about 400 years ago. He was a philosopher, an astronomer, and a skilled mathematician. He was also responsible for commissioning the place to be built in 1616. His design was supposedly so brilliant that nobody would ever need to reheat the water. It was believed that he made it so that just one candle was needed to heat the entire bathhouse. However, recent excavations have made this theory unlikely. Archaeologists found an underground ceramic piping system leading from the nearby mosque to the public toilets. This piping system was almost certainly responsible for heating the bathhouse as well, but it was still a fairly complicated operation. A torch was used to burn natural methane and sulfur oxide coming from the waste of the public toilet. Wastewater was then poured into a nearby marsh, and the gas was collected and pushed through a piping system, which resulted in heat for the baths. Pretty advanced, huh? Number 7. The Cave of the Beast. Archaeologists were exploring the dark and creepy underground caverns of Cueva del Arco in Spain when they found something unbelievable. They pushed through a small rocky hole in a place so cramped they could hardly move and slithered into a massive cavern. The explorers then stumbled upon a huge chamber that was left untouched for thousands of years, with a vaulted ceiling reaching nearly 65 feet high. Then, as the archaeologists slowly explored the vast cavern, one of their flashlights illuminated a spot on the rock wall. What Ignacio Martín Lerma found were claw marks left behind by ancient beasts. It was an extremely haunting thing to see so deep in the earth, far from the sun. The marks were discovered in a place where giant predators weren't likely to exist. The ancient scratches were apparently left behind by European cave bears 27,000 years ago. These things were absolute monsters, estimated to be around 2,200 pounds of pure fury. They were huge mammals and major predators who dominated southern Europe. But how in the world did they get into the cave system? Unfortunately, there isn't a clear answer, but researchers have been exploring Cueva del Arco for years. They found settlements from the Stone Age that dated back 7,000 years. They even found proof of early human habitation from 50,000 years ago. Now there appears to have been bears living down there at one point too, but nobody knows how or why. Number 6. The Hidden Chamber. Chavin de Huantar is nothing but a decrepit ruin today. The site can be found about 150 miles north of Lima, the modern capital of Peru, and it was once the heart of the powerful Chavin civilization. This was a culture that flourished in the Andes long before the rise of the Inca Empire. They built the city of Chavin de Huantar around 1200 BC, although people were already living in the area's foothills for much longer, since at least 3000 BC. When the mighty kingdom crumbled and the Inca took over Peru, the city fell into disrepair. Over the centuries, locals used stones from the city to build their own houses. They disassembled temples one piece at a time to construct small villages. People were living inside the ruins of Chavin de Huantar up until the 1940s. Recently, archaeologists found a secret here. They uncovered a narrow air duct leading to a previously unknown ritual chamber that was situated 24 feet beneath one of the city's temples. The hidden chamber could be older than every other building at the site. It's a truly shocking discovery that could change everything we know about the Chavin culture. Archaeologist John Rick told Peruvian reporters that he believes the chamber is at least 3,000 years old. It took a year for Rick to safely tunnel underneath the temple and squeeze himself into the chamber. But after doing so, the only thing he found in there was a heavy stone bowl decorated like an Andean condor. It resembled something straight out of an Indiana Jones movie, a single priceless relic that was uncovered after tunneling into a long-forgotten chamber. The bowl was almost certainly used in a secret ritual. The hidden chamber is also evidence that underneath the ancient city of Chavin de Huantar is an even older settlement, one that's still waiting to be revealed. And now for number 5. But first, it's shoutout time! I want to give a big thank you to Rex Adair and Ethan Spradlin for supporting this channel. If you are new here, don't forget to subscribe and join the family. Number 5. The New Grange Tomb. A group of farmers living in Ireland got together and built one of the greatest monuments of the Stone Age 5,200 years ago, constructing what we now call the New Grange Tomb. It's a mound over 270 feet in diameter and rises 43 feet into the air. It also covers an area of roughly 1 acre. There's only one way into the mound, a passage leading underneath the dirt into an underground chamber with 3 large alcoves. It's important to note that the passage lines up directly with the sun as it rises on the winter solstice, filling the tomb with incredible golden light. The stones along the front of the tomb are also decorated with extremely early megalithic art, like a giant mural. Inside the 3 alcoves is absolutely nothing. While archaeologists call it a tomb, the truth is that they don't know what it was used for. Since it was built in 3200 BC, it's older than both the Great Pyramids of Giza and Stonehenge. It could have been used in ceremonies, for astrological rituals, or as a place of community worship. 3 important citizens of the farming community were probably buried here, but unfortunately, we don't know anything about them. Number 4. The Cave of the Cibil. The Cave of the Cibil was discovered underneath the ancient city of Cumae on the outskirts of Naples in Italy. It's believed the cave had some association with the ancient priestess known as the Cumaean Cibil, who presided over the oracle of Apollo. If legend is to be believed, the oracle sat in her dark cavern beneath a temple and was given prophecies from the gods. Every time the gods would give her a prediction, she would write it down on some leaves and would then display them at the entrance of her underground lair. It's impossible to say how much of the legend is true, but there was definitely some strange stuff that occurred in the cave. The Cibil was supposedly a mortal woman who was given longevity by Apollo in exchange for her love. But then, when the god's love became too much, she refused him and eventually withered away. The Cibil's cave was found in 1932 by the Italian archaeologist Amedeo Maiuri, the very same man who was involved with the first investigations of Pompeii. Archaeologists believe it was constructed 2,500 years ago by the Greeks, but nothing of importance has been found inside. After thousands of years, any artifacts the oracle left behind were pillaged by civilizations who came later. Number 3. Underground Roman Aqueduct. Archaeologists in Italy discovered a new underground branch of an ancient aqueduct. It was built about 500 years after the Cave of the Cibil in a location nearby. The aqueduct, known as the Aqua Augusta, stretched a whopping 87 miles to carry water to the luxury villas up on the hill of Posillipo. These were extraordinarily wealthy Roman elite who lived during the transition from the Roman Republic to the Roman Empire. They had their very own aqueduct, which was built around 30 BC, and it delivered their own personal supply of fresh water. The discovery of the aqueduct was made by Graziano Ferrari and his associates with the Coccius Association. The team found a preserved section buried beneath a hill. For years, locals thought it was an ancient tunnel. Children used to play in it, but nobody ever realized it was once used to bring privileged Romans their drinking and bathing water. Number 2. The Maya Cave of Horror. Actum Tunicil Muknal directly translates to Cave of the Crystal Sepulchre, and it was truly a Maya cave of horror. According to archaeologists, it was used in ancient ceremonies by a group of Maya living in the jungles of Belize. In Maya mythology, the universe was divided into 3 major realms. Like so many other ancient myths of the world, there was the sky, the earth, and the underworld. However, the Maya believed they could reach the underworld through portals underground. These gateways could be found in the dark caves and tunnels stretching underneath the Maya Empire. One such access point to the land of the dead was Actum Tunicil Muknal. This subterranean system goes on for roughly 3 miles and contains huge chambers over 70 feet tall. There are also streams within the tunnels, along with evidence of ancient Maya activity. Archaeologists found artifacts here from as far back as 250 AD. The earliest artifacts discovered were offerings of cobs of maize, likely deposited alongside human sacrifices deep inside the cave system. Archaeologists say these sacrifices were typically made after a large regional drought. When rain stopped falling and crops started to suffer, people were sacrificed to the gods in order to appease them. They did this because, in order for rain to fall, these ancient people believed they needed to make the gods happy. But here's what a lot of people don't realize. The Maya weren't always involved in human sacrifice. This wasn't something they practiced throughout their entire existence as a civilization. It wasn't until around 750 AD, when the Great Drought started to destroy their society, that they took up the brutal tradition of making sacrifices to the gods. Between 750 and 900 AD, the same years when large Maya cities started to be abandoned, a desperate few began slaughtering huge amounts of citizens. It was all in an effort to save their people, an effort that ultimately failed. Number 1. The door to Assyria. For 2,600 years, a doorway remained sealed in the ancient city of Nimrud, located in modern Iraq. The door was recently discovered during excavations at the lost palace of the Assyrian king Adad-nirari III, who ruled the Assyrian Empire between 811 and 783 BC. It was a shocking discovery because archaeologists were digging around for the first time since ISIS started blowing up monuments in the area a decade ago. The palace was first excavated by British archaeologist Austen Henry Layard in the 1840s. All kinds of slabs and pieces of artwork have since been discovered here, but the region became too dangerous for researchers to work due to the rise of ISIS. Only recently were scientists able to go back and start digging again. The door is nothing short of spectacular. It's 6.5 feet tall and is made of solid stone. The door is also decorated with images of Assyrian archers. Michael Dante from the University of Pennsylvania says the door survived the Babylonian siege over 2,000 years ago. It then became buried along with the palace and somehow survived the destruction that was carried out by ISIS. It was shocking to find under the dirt and rubble of Nimrud a real palace door the mighty kings of Mesopotamia used to walk through. It makes you wonder how many kings' hands touched this slab of stone in the past. Number 10. The Gate of the Gods. Luis Delgado Mamani was a local tour guide in Peru in the 1990s. He was the man who accidentally stumbled upon the archaeological treasure of Aramumuru, deep in the Andes Mountains. The site is also called Puerta de Ayumarca, or the Gate of the Gods. It's one of the most controversial archaeological sites in all of South America, with numerous theories relating to its origins and its purpose. Aramumuru isn't a city or a crumbling temple, it's simply a gate. It is a huge door-like structure carved out of the mountainside near the sacred cultural center of Lake Titicaca. The door is 23 feet high and has a deep circular depression at its center. Mainstream archaeologists think the gate was used in ceremonies, or it had something to do with astronomy. But the truth is that nobody even knows who built it. The door was likely carved by a civilization that came years before the Inca. Some have even suggested aliens. Many believe Aramumuru was a portal used to travel from one place to another. It's been associated with the Sumerians of Mesopotamia and even with the Anunnaki. There are many who believe the Gate of the Gods was once an active stargate, but has since been decommissioned. What do you think? Do you believe in stargates? Let me know in the comments. Number 9. Baby Buddha. In 2018, a documentary was made about the French exploration of Australia. During the documentary, the team used metal detectors way out in the remote region of Western Australia. As they were waving their metal detectors over the ground, they picked up a signal. After a bit of digging, the team pulled out a Buddha statue that had been buried in the earth. The Buddha statue appears to be over 500 years old, and nobody knows how it got there. At first, international experts laughed at the discovery. They called the filmmakers liars and believed it was an elaborate hoax. However, BBC's Antiques Roadshow recently confirmed the discovery as 100% authentic. They really did find a Buddha statue from the 15th century in the Australian desert. Filmmakers Leon Deschamps and Shane Thompson are now trying to figure out how the baby Buddha got to the place they found it. Antiquities experts with the BBC say the bronze Buddha figure was made hundreds of years ago in China. It's just over 2 pounds and likely came from the Ming dynasty. Now, the experts are starting to wonder if travelers from ancient China hadn't reached Australia hundreds of years ago. It's a controversial theory, but one with some evidence to back it up. Buddhism has been around since at least the 5th century BC. It wouldn't be that surprising to think that some Ming Dynasty explorers reached Australia, got lost in the desert, and lost track of their Buddha statue. For all we know, the bones of those explorers are still out there, somewhere deep under the desert sand. And now for number 8. But first, it's shout-out time! I want to say a big thank you to Patricia Green and Charlie Knight for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like these. Number 8. Sigurd Snake in the Eye. There are a lot of controversial figures from Viking history. One of them is Sigurd Snake in the Eye, a man who may or may not have existed. Sigurd is a legendary Viking warrior who historians say could have ruled Denmark in the year 873. According to ancient Viking texts, Sigurd's Snake in the Eye was one of Ragnar Lothbrok's sons. Ragnar was yet another historical Viking who may be nothing more than a character in a story. His other son was said to be Ivar the Boneless, someone who definitely did exist. Ivar brought his Viking hordes to England and waged war across the British Isles. There is very little evidence that Ragnar Lothbrok ever existed. He was only immortalized about 350 years after his alleged death, thanks to fables written down in Iceland by Vikings who had only recently moved there. Legend says Ragnar was captured by King Ella and thrown into a pit of snakes. Shortly after that, in 865, his sons arrived with the great heathen army and attacked. The issue with Ragnar's story is that it's right on the edge of myth and reality. The great heathen army really did attack East Anglia, but the dramatic tales of Ragnar were likely embellished by the writers. In terms of evidence, this is what we have. There are 2 references to a famous Viking raider appearing in 840 AD, written by the Anglo-Saxons. They mentioned somebody called Ragnall, who may have been Ragnar. The French wrote that he died, while the Irish wrote of a famous Viking named Ragnar establishing a settlement near Dublin in 851. But unfortunately, there isn't a single piece of physical evidence that Ragnar ever existed. Number 7. A lost chamber in the pyramid. Egyptologists recently announced the shocking discovery of a secret chamber inside the Great Pyramid of Giza. The discovery is hugely controversial, mainly because no one can explain it. A group of scientists scanned the Pyramid of Khufu using cosmic rays to identify a 30-meter-long corridor. The empty space is directly above the pyramid's main entrance. The corridor is massive, but only adds to the riddle of the world's most famous ancient monument. While there is a lot of debate over what the pyramid was used for, most mainstream archaeologists agree it was built as a tomb. I mean, some say it was a giant battery to power alien ships, but that's not really clear. The tomb was for Pharaoh Khufu, who ruled 4,500 years ago in the 26th century BC. This isn't the only time a pocket of space has been found in the pyramid. In 2015, a group of scientists from the Nagoya University of Japan, along with some others, found a different secret room. There are now multiple pockets in the pyramid that nobody can explain. The newest corridor appears to be leading somewhere, possibly to a sealed door. There could be a never-before-seen room hiding deep in the pyramid, only accessible if half the pyramid is torn down. What do you think is in this secret room? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Number 6. The James Uuary. In the 1st century AD, the bones of the dead were often put in limestone boxes called ossuaries. In 2002, the existence of an extraordinary box of bones was announced in Washington, of all places, at a press conference headed by the Discovery Channel and the Biblical Archaeology Society. They announced the discovery of the James Uuary, an ancient crate of human remains with a very peculiar inscription on it. The inscription is in Aramaic and says, "James, son of Joseph, brother of Jesus." The ossuary gained immediate attention because of its apparent connection with the Holy Family. If the script on the box is to be believed, this truly holds the bones of Jesus' brother. The ossuary was found near the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Out of the thousands of ossuaries here, it's the only one claiming to be filled with James's bones. André Lemaire was the man who initially translated the Aramaic. Everything seemed to be confirmed until the Israel Antiquities Authority got involved in 2003. They argued the inscription to be a forgery, and then in 2004, the man who owned the ossuary, Oded Golan, was charged with 44 counts of forgery and fraud. His trial went on for 7 years before he was finally acquitted of forgery. Instead, he was only convicted of illegal trading in antiquities. Experts have still yet to reach a conclusion on if the James Uuary is legit or nothing but a clever fake. Number 5. The Roswell Rock. In 2004, Robert Ridge of New Mexico discovered a rock. Robert was about 11 miles from the internationally famous Roswell crash site when he found this mysterious rock. The Roswell site was where a UFO allegedly crashed in 1947. The UFO was then taken by the military to their secret base at Area 51. We've never had any kind of confirmation from the government that there was truly an alien crash, but many people believe it's all part of a cover-up. Whatever the case is with Area 51, the Roswell site continues to attract people from all over the world. Robert Ridge was a little shocked when he came across a rock with a very peculiar pattern on it in the desert. It looked like it was carved with crop circle symbols. The rock is extremely smooth, almost too smooth, and on its surface is what appears to be a machine-carved picture of a crop circle, the same kind that was popping up in random fields and farms in the 1970s. It's fairly obvious the rock isn't prehistoric, because whoever made the symbol must have used modern technology. It looks like it was engraved using a laser. The discovery of the rock was immediately controversial. Most people say Robert is a hoaxer and the rock is a fake, and others believe it's proof of extraterrestrial contact. What do you think? Number 4. The Garden Tomb. In 1867, the most controversial tomb in religious history was unearthed in Jerusalem. Experts uncovered a tomb cut into the rock that took the world by storm. It's called the Garden Tomb, and many believe it was the site where Jesus Christ was buried and resurrected. But there is no end to the controversy. Protestants wholeheartedly believe the tomb was once occupied by Jesus. Yet mainstream archaeologists like Gabriel Barkay trust in science. Gabriel was the one who dated the tomb as being carved in the 8th century BC, 800 years before the birth of Christ. It's possible that Jesus was buried in a reused tomb, something not uncommon in the 1st century. However, Jesus being placed in a used tomb would directly contradict the Bible. That's because the Bible claims Jesus had his own tomb made by Joseph of Arimathea. There is another piece of science that doesn't agree with the Protestant theory. The trough in front of the tomb, connected to a nearby cistern, dates to the Crusader period of the 13th century AD. None of the dating lines up with the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, and for that reason, nobody can officially say whether Jesus was truly buried in the Garden Tomb. Nobody knows who was buried in this mysterious rock-cut tomb, or where their body went. Number 3. Abraham's Well. The story of Abraham's well is one of the most important entries in the Bible. After the birth of his son Isaac, Abraham had a dispute with Abimelech over the use of a particular well. After the pair settled their dispute by having a festive meal, Abimelech returned to the land of the Philistines, and Abraham planted a giant tree next to his well. The well became known as the Beersheba, or the Well of the Oath. It would be in later chapters of the Bible that Abraham's son Isaac fought for possession over the well with the Philistines. The story of Abraham and his well is one of courage, sacrifice, peace, and hospitality. Abraham really does serve as the starting point for the 3 major Abrahamic religions: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The controversial thing about Abraham's well is that it's a real place in Israel on the outskirts of Beersheba. This is a real place. Yet it was mentioned in the book of Genesis over 2,000 years ago. There are dozens of historic wells in Beersheba, but only one traditionally called Abraham's Well. According to the Jerusalem Post, the well receives roughly 25,000 visitors at its small museum every single year. People truly believe the well, which is currently protected behind metal railings, was dug by Abraham himself. Number 2. Spanish Hill. Spanish Hill is one of the most bizarre archaeological sites in North America. That's primarily because most people know nothing about it. The hill is in the shape of a sugar loaf, located near the Chemung River in New York State. This was land that belonged to the Susquehanna before the Europeans arrived and took it away. The hill is unique in that it's unusual for where it is. It's nowhere near a hilly region and looks like an artificial lump of dirt dumped in the middle of a flatland. Plus, it has a weird outline, suggesting that the dirt was piled there on purpose. There are also a handful of fortifications on the top that date back unknown centuries. Archaeologists took note of the mysterious hill in the early 20th century, but there were few investigations done and it became a popular picnic location for locals. Houses were built around the hill, and these days it's covered in no trespassing signs. The original ruins have mostly been destroyed by the farmer who took control of most of the land. So what's so controversial about Spanish Hill? Many believe the hill represents ancient fortifications from centuries ago. This may have been a stronghold for a local Native American culture. We know people lived here over 1,000 years ago, perhaps even earlier. Spanish Hill may have been built for use by shamans who gathered in crude ceremonial enclosures at the summit and conducted rituals. But we'll never know the truth since so much of the land has been destroyed and neglected. Number 1. The Tartaria Tablets. In 1961, archaeologists came across a trio of mysterious tablets at a Neolithic village in Romania. The tablets remain shocking to this day because they are inscribed with what appears to be Vinca symbols, and perhaps the earliest form of writing in the entire world. The tablets go back 4,700 years, at least they do officially. Some believe they date even further back, 7,500 years, to the beginning of human civilization. The biggest issue is that ever since archaeologist Nicola discovered the 3 tablets, no one has been able to agree on an interpretation of the inscriptions. Some scholars have attributed the tablets to the Danube civilization. Others believe the script is some kind of early Sumerian. The Neolithic village of Tartaria existed in 2700 BC. In all likelihood, the tablets can't be older than that. Still, the writing system represented on the tablets is unknown. Nobody has ever deciphered the symbols. We don't know if it's writing from an ancient European culture or if these scribbles predate the earliest Sumerian cuneiforms. The whole thing is a controversial mystery. Number 10. Spider in the Tummy. In 2014, Dylan Maxwell went on the vacation of a lifetime, but when he returned home, he had a spider in his body. Dylan traveled to the beautiful Indonesian island of Bali, only to have an 8-legged nuisance burrow through a tiny scar and travel into his torso. Dylan, a native of Australia, held the spider inside his stomach for 3 days before it was surgically removed. Amazingly, the spider left a red trail, almost like a burn mark, from his belly button to his chest. Being from Australia, I'm sure Dylan has had his fair share of experiences with scary spiders, but he probably didn't expect one to be inside of him. When it first happened, Dylan didn't know what was going on. The pain and the redness made it clear he was dealing with some kind of insect, but when he saw a doctor at a local medical center in Bali, they figured it was just an insect bite. The doctor gave him antihistamine and said that should clear it up, but things didn't go away, and Dylan still felt something wasn't right. When he got back to Australia, he still had pain, and there was a fierce red line from something making its way up towards his head. Australian doctors ran some tests and looked inside his stomach, and that was where they found the tropical spider. Doctors had to remove the spider from inside Dylan. Then they put it into a specimen jar like some kind of alien creature. You know, as a souvenir from Bali. Number 9. Impregnated by a squid. An extremely bizarre medical report was released to the public in 2018, detailing a woman who had a squid lay eggs inside of her. According to the medical report, a 63-year-old woman required emergency medical attention after she ate a raw squid and it inseminated her mouth. Her tongue was literally impregnated by eating undercooked squid without removing the proper internal organs. When doctors examined the woman, who was experiencing some strange symptoms, they found 12 tiny bug-like bags of squid reproductive juice in her tongue and gums. These foreign bodies were soon identified to be squid spermatophores from the Japanese flying squid. Doctors say the woman failed to remove the internal organs and then made her problem worse by not properly boiling the animal before eating it. As she slurped the squid in her mouth, the spermatophores found a soft place to embed themselves, her tongue and gums. She didn't manage to eat the entire squid because as soon as her mouth was inseminated, she spat it out. She felt as if 1,000 ants had been set loose inside of her jaws and experienced immense pain and a disgusting squirming sensation. That squirming sensation was the bug-like organisms penetrating her oral mucosa. The squids never fully hatched inside her mouth. She went straight to a doctor and had the tiny spermatophores professionally removed. I don't know all of the scientific details, but that is pretty disturbing. What do you think? And now for number 8. But first, I want to give a big shout out to Travis King and Hande Sarapoglu. Thanks so much for watching and supporting Origins Explained. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe and join the family. We'd love to have you. Number 8. Monster Tapeworm. Okay, I'm gonna try to get through this one without throwing up. A man's tapeworm became internationally famous in 2021 when it was recorded being pulled out of its host's rectum. The tapeworm was 59 feet long, making it one of the longest ever pulled out of the human body. Ugh. You might be familiar with tapeworms. But what you might not know is that the human body is home to trillions of microorganisms, many of them found inside our gut. Most of these microorganisms allow our bodies to function properly, but sometimes we get infested with a parasite that works against us. In the case of this 67-year-old man in Thailand, he had a beef tapeworm in his body. It was causing chronic gas and miserable stomach pain. The parasite had infested his lower intestines and was gobbling up all of his food. These kinds of tapeworms can enter the human body when somebody eats beef that hasn't been properly cooked or that's already infected. That's probably how he got his tapeworm. Doctors remove the tapeworm as they would in any ordinary case. But this tapeworm kept on coming. By the time the whole thing was removed from his body, doctors were in shock. They think it's the biggest tapeworm that's been found in Thailand in over 50 years. After it was removed, doctors suggested the individual change his eating habits to avoid another one. Have you ever had a parasite or a tapeworm? I hope not, but if so, let us know in the comments. Number 7. Ear cockroaches. In 2022, Zane Wedding got a little more than he bargained for when he went for a leisurely swim. The 40-year-old man from Auckland, New Zealand, took a dip at his local pool only to have a cockroach wiggle into his ear. When he was finished with his swim and toweling off, he thought it strange that his hearing was obstructed in his left ear. He thought he had water stuck in his ear and kept trying to get it out his whole way home. He used some drops and fell asleep on the couch that night, but when he woke up, his ear was still bothering him. He knew by this point that something was wrong and went straight to the doctor. Unfortunately for Zane, the doctor was no help at all. The doctor simply said he had water blocked in his ear and should go home and dry it with a hairdryer. That was exactly what Zane did for the entire weekend. He chewed gum, went for a run, used ear candles, but he just could not get the terrible sensation in his ear to stop. Finally, with the weekend over, he went to an ear, nose, and throat doctor early on Monday. The doctor took one look inside his ear and said, "Oh my God, I think you have an insect in your ear." The entire weekend, Zane had been blowing on his ear with a hairdryer, essentially cooking the cockroach very slowly inside his eardrum. He didn't have water in his head, he had a cockroach moving around in his skull. The doctor took less than 5 minutes to get the thing out, and the relief was instant. The trauma, maybe not so much. Also, let that be a lesson to everyone. If you have a bad doctor or something just doesn't feel right, definitely get a second opinion, or maybe even a third. Number 6. Brainworm. In April of 2001, a woman in Arizona was busy recovering from brain surgery. Dawn Becerra told local news outlets that after 6 hours of surgery, she was feeling much better than she had been. Dawn had to get surgery because after she visited Mexico and ate a pork taco 3 years prior, a worm had gotten into her system. Dawn became sick 3 weeks after eating the mystery taco. Soon, she started suffering from seizures, but doctors couldn't understand what was happening. Then, after extensive testing, they realized she had a parasitic worm inside of her brain. The worm had caused something called neurocysticercosis, or a lesion in her brain. This case could have been fatal. The last thing anybody needs is a worm tearing apart their brain. Doctors at the Mayo Clinic in Arizona believe the taco Dawn ate contained Taenia solium, a fairly common parasite in Latin America. In unsanitary conditions, the parasite can transfer to the human body through their food. Dawn ingested the parasite. It attached itself to her intestinal wall, and it soon developed into a worm. It then had a free-for-all inside her body, swimming through her bloodstream like it was on vacation. It finally reached her brain, where it did some tissue damage before dying and decaying, resulting in the surrounding tissue becoming inflamed. To remove the worm, Dawn had to undergo brain surgery while still awake. It was a traumatic, brutal, and life-changing experience. But Dawn came out on the other side with a clean bill of health, not to mention a newfound respect for proper sanitation. Are you going to eat pork tacos after hearing this story? Let me know in the comments, and be sure to subscribe while you're at it. Number 5. Spider in the ear. In 2019, a woman from Kansas City thought she had water in her ear. Susie Torres told the local news that she was suffering from a waterlogged feeling in her ear that just wouldn't go away. She went to the doctor, and the medical assistant who looked into her ear nearly screamed. Using the light from their instrument, they were able to see something with a whole lot of legs moving around inside her ear. It was a spider. And not just any spider. Doctors removed an extremely venomous brown recluse, one of only 2 venomous arachnids native to the United States. Susie was extremely lucky the spider didn't bite her while making its nest inside her head. Oh my god. I hope this video doesn't give you nightmares. Sorry everyone! Nobody has any idea where the spider came from. Susie was never able to pinpoint exactly when the uncomfortable feeling started, and she just figured she had water stuck in her ear from a shower. Nonetheless, the experience has left her traumatized. She's taken to stuffing cotton balls in her ears at night to make sure that spiders don't crawl into her skull anymore. That's a good idea. Number 4. Snail in the knee. A young boy in California got into a bit of an accident at the beach. He got a scrape on his knee, something that isn't normally a big deal. The only issue was that a sea snail somehow got inside of the wound and then grew inside of the child's right knee. It all happened in 2013 to young Paul Franklin, only 4 years old. He fell down, scraped his knee, and his father cleaned the wound and put a band-aid on it. A couple weeks later, the wound had clearly become infected. It was swollen and red, and Paul's mom was worried he might have a staph infection. They gave their son antibiotics, but there was a huge black bump underneath his skin. Paul's mother thought she might be able to drain the wound, figuring the black bump was some kind of giant pus bubble. Ugh. She squeezed the bump with 2 fingers and it popped out from her son's flesh. But she didn't understand because it looked like a small black rock with swirls on it. After she turned it over in her fingers, she realized it was a sea snail. Would you be brave enough to squeeze a wound, or would you go to the doctor? Let me know in the comments. The snail must have gotten into Paul's scrape while at the beach, then grew for all those weeks it was stuck inside his body. The preschooler was so thrilled, he kept the snail and even named it Turbo. Number 3. Fish in the bladder. It's not unusual in Asia to visit a fish spa, a place where you dunk yourself inside a tank of fish and they clean away all your dead skin. Actually, these fish spas can be found everywhere now. They're pretty popular. Some fish spas are only for your feet, while others might be used for your entire body. In 2011, NBC News reported on a story that had been circulating, but they weren't able to completely confirm. The story was about a man in China who visited one of these fish spas and dunked his body in the tank. While he was being nibbled on by the fish, he felt a sharp pain in the last place he wanted to feel a sharp pain, if you know what I mean. He immediately rushed himself to a clinic where doctors extracted an eel from his bladder that had somehow wiggled up his urethra. While that terrifying tale was never 100% confirmed, another similar case was. In India, doctors found a leech that had forced its way up a 16-year-old boy's urethra and made its home inside his bladder. The case report says the boy was partially submerged in a rice paddy and then in the following days began suffering from unexplained fevers and the urgent need to urinate. It took 2 months before the boy's family finally took him to the hospital, where doctors realized he had a leech in his bladder. But don't worry, the doctors removed the leech, and the boy made a full recovery. The same thing happened to a different teenage boy in 2007, also in India. Doctors reported the case of having to remove a small fish from the teenager's bladder. According to the teen, he was cleaning a fish tank and then decided to use the bathroom while still holding one of the fish. The fish somehow wiggled out of his hand, grabbed hold of his boy part, and squirmed up into his bladder. Doctors ultimately decided the boy was lying and that he had put the fish there on purpose, not realizing he would need to get it surgically removed. Have you ever been to a fish spa? Let me know in the comments, and be sure to subscribe. Number 2. Brain maggots. In 2017, a homeless woman in India had a maggot infestation in her head. The woman was discovered sitting on the side of the road and crying her eyes out because she was in immense pain. She was discovered in this atrocious state by volunteers with a local charity. We'll try not to get too graphic here because this is pretty disturbing. It was lucky for the woman because when the volunteer workers found her crying on the roadside in Rajasthan, she had maggots burrowed into her skull. The volunteers took the woman, later identified as Preeti Devi, to their organization's shelter. Once there, volunteers picked the maggots out of her skull one by one, cleaned out her wounds, and then cared for Preeti to keep the maggots from returning. You might be wondering how somebody could have maggots falling out of holes in their skull. The answer is that the victim was brutally assaulted 6 months prior and forced to live on the street. She was never able to seek medical attention, and her wounds were never cleaned. This is absolutely horrific. The opened wounds attracted flies which laid their eggs inside the cuts. Within a short period of time, the cuts became gaping wounds with maggots oozing out. If Preeti hadn't been picked up by the volunteers when they found her, she would undoubtedly have died. But ever since she was rescued, her wounds have completely healed. She says that their generous act restored her faith in humanity, and she said she was dying a slow death, and if the angels hadn't spotted her, she would have been dead by now. Preeti has decided to go home and start a new life. Number 1. The constipation eel. According to the Global Times, a man in China was hospitalized in 2021 after using a live eel to try and cure his constipation. The individual, who remains unnamed for fairly obvious reasons, had a nasty case of the not being able to go to the bathroom. In China, there is an old folk remedy in which you can use an eel inserted inside your body to cure a particularly bad case of constipation. So that's exactly what this man did. He shoved a 7.8-inch eel into his behind in an attempt to cure himself. But instead of relieving the man's medical condition, the eel slithered into his abdomen. You can probably guess where the rest of the story is going. The man had to rush himself to the hospital, though not for about a day. He was too shy to see the doctor, so he rolled around in his house in agony for around 24 hours before giving in, and apparently it was just in time. The doctor who performed the surgery to remove the eel said the man would have died because of the bacteria from the eel spreading in his large intestines. Thanks for watching. Hope you're not too seriously disturbed. Let me know what other stories you'd like to hear about next. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Bye!